We've been reporting tonight on the early adjournment of the ANC's 55th National Conference. The business that's now outstanding has been deferred to the 5th of January. It'll be a hybrid session ahead of the January 8th statement, which marks the formation of the ANC more than 100 years ago. That then, the January 8th statement, will be delivered in Mangaung in the Free State, and that's when the outstanding business of this National Conference will be dealt with. Let's talk about the ANC's conference, and we're joined in fact by ANC veteran Snuki Zikalala. Mr. Zikalala, very good evening to you. Grateful for your time. So, a 110-year-old organization that's been holding conferences for decades, unable to get through the business over 5 days, doesn't inspire much confidence looking on, does it?
Well, good evening to you and good evening to your viewers. Well, as you say, it's 110 years, and as you know, that this was the biggest conference of the ANC, where we have more than 5,000 delegates, 95% of them being delegates from the provinces, because as you know, our constitution makes it very clear that the conference of the ANC, 90% should be from branches. And of course, I think the biggest problem that we had is that it was a question of the electronic membership system, which was gridlocked in a sense that most of the members were not properly registered, did not appear on the register list, and especially in terms of accreditation. I think we lost a day. The first day, that is why our first day we only started at about 3 o'clock, because no one could be accredited if his membership has not been verified in the electronic system by his branch, because these are branch delegates, and so that's where the system was. And it was a problem of system. It's not a problem. Of course, we do admit as the ANC that we should have done better. People should have been registered at least 2 weeks in advance. But some of the branches could not correct timeously, and some of the information which was loaded by branch secretaries in the provinces was not accurate. For the Veterans League itself, we had something like 5 members, especially senior people who have more than 50 years uninterrupted service in the ANC. The system said they're on probation, despite the fact that their membership cards were okay, they paid their dues okay, the members in good standing, but the system said they're in probation. And those were delegates who were going to vote. And so you could see that is a system that really caused this havoc. That is why to date, when we left Nasrec now at about 4 o'clock, the Gauteng people were just going to vote, right. And we voted first as veterans. We voted at 9 o'clock, and it's only now that the voting is going to be completed this evening.
Let me put to you a question that someone actually used just as Fikile Mbalula was announcing this adjournment of the conference until January. They asked, how can a party that can't run a 5-day conference smoothly hope to run a country effectively? How would you address that?
Well, I think in terms of running the country, I think we do have our problems, and we do have our flaws in terms of running the country, because basically our deployment committee, which we support as the Veterans League, did not deploy skilled, competent patriots. When I talk about patriots, I mean not only ANC members need to be deployed in state-owned enterprises, but South Africans who are patriots and who are skilled, competent, and who like to add value to South African economy. And so that's why we left. But this system is new. Even us were shocked. The system that was introduced 2 years ago, it's a system now, all of a sudden, it's a system that collapsed. And so we're not saying that we're unable to run the country efficiently. We know exactly what made us not to run the country efficiently, because the looting and the Guptas, the looting, the mismanagement, and of course some of the people just came there to service, not to service the country itself, but also to loot state coffers. That was the biggest problem that we faced.
The problem, however, Mr. Zikalala, with what you're saying is that the problems around why the ANC has been inefficient as a governing party are long diagnosed. Over 10 years ago, the initial diagnosis was made. When you talk about the looting of state resources, just as recently as 2020 during the pandemic, we've been hearing multiple reports of alleged corruption in the midst of a health emergency. And you wonder if we can really say all of that is going to end through the election of a new leadership and a single conference.
Well, I think the new leadership, we are very clear as the Veterans League. We have come up with a document where we are saying that there should be deliverables. from those who are elected in the NEC. There should be a 2-year deliverable with tangible results. Because if the NEC members are not able to unite the organization, renew the organization, make sure that we deal with poverty, unemployment, and make sure that we grow the economy, why should they be there in the next coming 2 years? We have to make sure that the municipalities function optimally. That question of sewerage, water, electricity, all those issues must be addressed, because society just wants service. Society just wants service, and they want quality service. And I think we are capable of doing that. Now, the only thing that we are doing is that we deployed unskilled, number one. Number two, people are not competent. Number three, people are not there to serve society, but to serve themselves. And so that's one of the things that we have to deal with. But now, of course, a number of senior people are being arrested in parastatals. You saw what's happening in Transnet. And we still have to arrest more people. And then people will be afraid to steal from society. People will go there to serve society instead of amassing wealth in an illegal manner.
Just when you were talking about accountability and holding the NEC accountable on deliverables, should the ANC get to a point where it normalizes, in fact, the wholesale sacking, recalling of an NEC collective if indeed it fails to meet what it's promised, even if it's in the middle of its term?
Well, it's not to say we can't recall the NEC in the middle of its term. In the middle of its term, we have to have the National General Council. We can do that immediately within 2 years. If the NEC has failed to meet or to implement the policy positions that are going to be affirmed on the 5th of January, of course, during midterm we can have that right to recall them. We do have that right. We can have that right, because they'll have to come and tell us exactly how have they progressed in terms of implementing our policy decisions. That is possible.
So Ramaphosa, in his address today at the adjournment of conference, I must get that right before I say the close, spoke about how everyone needs to get in line and respect the decisions taken at this conference. How much resistance do you expect that line will get, given just how contentious the very election of this NEC collective has been?
No, there was no contention in terms of elective of the conference itself. And as far as we're concerned, the conference was smooth. It's only of two issues that people have raised. Firstly, it's a question of Andila Lungisa, who's on parole, and some of them they said despite the fact that he's on parole, he must be on the voting list. And so that's unacceptable. But the compromise was reached. Secondly, on Batabile Dlamini, as people know that twice he was sentenced by a court of law for perjury. And still some individuals, I'm not saying all members of the conference, they wanted him to be on the voting list. That was allowed. But we as veterans, we've called on all delegates that they should not vote for people who are tainted with corruption. People who are involved in mass looting of state enterprises, because that robs a government from delivering on its core values. And so we are saying that that's what we pleaded to delegates, that they must not vote for people who are found wanting at all.
But still, Ramaphosa's victory as ANC, for example, it's been argued as a reflection of just how divided the African National Congress is. I mean, a difference of about 500 votes, I think it was, compared to Snuki Zikalala, who was the other candidate for the presidency. How do you then begin to pull everyone back into the circle and get them to work together? Because that's not a massive difference.
No, it is a massive difference compared to the difference between Nkosazana Zuma and Snuki. And as you know, that what we are seeing currently, we are saying all the top 7, they must work as one. In as far as we're concerned, we don't differ in ideology, we don't differ in commitment to ANC values, traditions, and principles. We don't differ. The only thing that was there, it was because of those who were implicated in the Zondo Commission. They're the ones who wanted to derail everything, but I think they were not successful at all, because they did not want that more people who are members of the NEC should be arrested. And we are saying that if they're involved in malfeasance, it's their problem. It's got nothing to do with us, because the ANC policies are totally against corruption. If individuals are involved in that, let them face the might of the law.
Should this NEC that's now going to be elected, should they all be recalled if they fail to deliver electoral success for the ANC come 2024, or even an increase in electoral support?
No, of course. If what we are saying, we can only recall them when we have the NGC. Because when NGC is where we review whether the government has implemented policy decisions which are taken by this conference. And so if they fail to do that, and secondly, if 2024, our electoral fortunes have not, we have gone down more than 40% or more than 45%, they must face the electorate. And so they have to work hard to unite and deliver on our set objectives and ensure that we create employment, we get rid of poverty, and we make sure that the economy grows.
Glad you mentioned employment, because just a short while ago, our reporter Gervin Whittles was speaking to COSATU Solipedre, and he was talking about how there's that still a remaining rift between the ANC government and the public sector unions over wages, and if it's not healed, Mr. Pedro suggested that they may very well, as COSATU, choose to endorse, say, an SACP electoral campaign come 2024. Do you think that's reasonable grounds for concern for the ANC?
Well, that's, in as far as we are concerned, that's not reasonable. And as far as we're concerned, that we are still going to engage with COSATU, because where will we get the money from? We'll get the money, as we know that our economy has not been growing for the past 3 years. We had COVID pandemic, and so the economy was on a standstill. And so where do they expect the government to get money from? We cannot go and borrow money just to pay wages. And so I think that's what the engagement will be, especially with our partners, saying that, but where do you expect us to get the money from? We can't go to IMF, World Bank, and borrow money to pay wages.
Right.
You see, and so that's unacceptable. That's not sustainable at all. But we believe that we'll definitely reach a consensus with them. An agreement will be reached, especially with alliance partners, because they do understand the implications of leaving the alliance, the implications of a mass strike, because what it means is that they are grounding the economy to a halt.
Right.
And so that is going to affect workers as well.
So you talk about how there's an understanding from the alliance partner in the form of Labour, but I wonder how strong or how clear that understanding is when you consider that in this year alone, we've had workers boo and deny 2 ANC leaders a platform. The first, President Cyril Ramaphosa on Workers' Day this year. The second, Gwede Mandashe, the ANC national chairperson, when he tried to speak at a COSATU Congress.
Well, I think a majority of members of COSATU are members of the ANC, and we feel that that was a bad reaction, especially from workers. And so there is going to be an alliance summit where all these issues are going to be dealt with. Because that alliance summit, we have to take our gloves off, and then we have to make sure that we meet with our alliance partners. They tell especially the ANC about their grievances. How can we work together with them? Because it's important for us to work with COSATU and the South African Communist Party. They are our alliance partners, and we cannot afford to fight with one another over wages, over mass unemployment. They are correct. Mass unemployment, the government of the ANC must make sure that it deals with that. Over poverty, the ANC must make sure that we deal with that, because we have ministers who are members of COSATU and members of the Communist Party who are within the ANC government. And so it's important for us to put facts on the table, to put facts on saying, how is the economy growing? How can we grow the economy? Currently, the social compact between the alliance, especially COSATU and government, has not been entered into. So it has not been signed. And so we have to sit down with alliance partners and say, if the social compact is not signed, we won't be able to grow the economy, won't be able to create jobs, won't be able to get rid of poverty. And so that our alliance partners should understand that.
Snuki Zikalala, ANC veteran, thank you for your time today, sir.